Hey all, welcome to the Wade Champions podcast. So excited to have you here. In 320 or so podcasts, this is the first time we've had an entire coaching staff on at the same time. So well deserved with your coming off a national championship. But it'll be a little different format for us. So thank you all, Goff and Molly and Marguerite, for being on. We truly appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
I will do my best to, as Jerry and I ask questions, to kind of direct them towards one of you, so we're not all talking over each other and everything. And but yeah, so much to learn, and I want to kind of start maybe just Marguerite, like, what has this journey been like with your first collegiate head coaching job to end be the only team in the country that ends the season on a win?
Yeah, it was in short, it was unbelievable. I think even months now later, we're still kind of wrestling with the fact that that happened and it happened in the fashion that it did. And so it was nothing short of just amazing. I probably couldn't have asked for a better first season. But looking forward, I think we see it as the start of hopefully something really special. And so for as much as we enjoyed the last year and everything that led up to it, I think it just bred like a new excitement for us as a staff to continue this forward and really see what we can do in the next couple of years.
Mm, perhaps the most famous coach all time at UCLA, John Wooden, once said, "I hope all my friends win one national championship and all my enemies win 10." Um, so it'll be interesting to see. He just talked about like the pressure and the expectations. Once you've won one, you should just be able to do it every season, right? Like, look how easy that was.
Yeah, they definitely so many people have told us like, wow, you really set the bar pretty high. Like, yeah, I feel like it could all go downhill from here. But I mean, what a way to start it off. And obviously the win was so special. I've been very fortunate to have won as an assistant. This was my first as a head coach, which kind of had its own twist on it. But for both Molly and Goff, it was their first win. And so just to see that excitement, that joy that you experience in the first time winning, like that's something that you just can't compare to anything else. Like it's just so special. So when I was watching us celebrate, like I was really watching all of our players celebrate for the first time, and honestly, also watching Molly and Goff just experience that for the first time. It's something super special.
What was that? Goff, what was it like? I mean, I was reading about your background and obviously growing up in, Clairefontaine as a player and your experience as a high level player growing up in some incredible places to come. And then obviously you've been coaching college for a while in the US. What has that journey been like for you?
So far, it's been amazing, to be honest with you. I remember the first phone call I had with Mark when we were talking about like maybe the opportunity for me to be the coach here, and then like our vision and what we wanted to put in place, and then just seeing happening through the season and having the opportunity to wake up one day and to be able to play for a national championship and being out there for a week in Cary and winning the game and winning the game in that fashion, and then just see the joy around everybody. And even for myself, that was just we made it. Like when the referee blew the whistle, we said like we actually did it on the first season. So that was just just a pure joy for from start to finish.
Well, I think, like Jerry, I watched the game and it was all happening so fast at the end. Yeah, I don't even know how you could actually process what's happening. It almost must have felt surreal in the moment as well. What about for you, Molly?
Yeah, it definitely was incredible. I think, we all believed in our group, but when it was all going down, it literally, as we always, all girls would say, like it just was written. And they, at no point did it really feel like we were going to lose. And then in an odd way, I remember looking back on that corner, it felt like 21 seconds was a lot of time, even though it wasn't. Like Maddie runs over, gives Allie the ball. And then when we got that tying goal, like the three of us all just like start tearing up and like we needed a moment of magic and we got it. And then it was like, okay. And at that point, we knew that we're going to find another way to get, the game winning goal at whatever point that would have come at. But it was complete euphoria when that goal went in. And to be in a stadium with, I don't know, 10,000 Tar Heel fans and a solid 300 strong Bruin fans, it was an incredible moment. Like one that I think we go back and watch highlights now, or we think about it. I think we still all get chills, and one that is very special and it'll be unforgettable for all of us, regardless of where our careers go.
I mean, for those of you who are listening and maybe don't remember, but first of all, number one is you're playing against a team coached by Anson Dorrance, who's a very, very dear friend of mine. He's won 22 national championships, and it's 10 minutes to go in the game, and you're down 2 goals. Anyone that knows soccer knows that you don't win a game being down 2 goals with 10 minutes. You just don't do it. It's unheard of. It's like, I wonder sometimes if inside how you keep that magic going, how you keep the belief going with 10 minutes to go. I mean, to be honest, the cameras were panning on the winning, quote unquote, the winning team's bench, right? And they're over there. I don't know if you know this, but they were kind of celebrating. I mean, it was like a lot of joy, like we're winning this game. We're national champions. Let's just get this going. And how do you, down 2 goals? I mean, Molly, you just said, we always believed that we were going to do it, but we're human beings, and that had to be a tough spot to be in, number one. So what are the feelings 11 minutes to go? And how do you keep their chi? I call it their chi, their energy. How do you keep them focused on really what we all really want, but somehow don't believe that at this point we can have? Does that make sense at all?
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, it was one of those where when we were down 2-0, I think the common thought that we were having, like, we are so much better than 2-0. Like, there's no way 2-0 is representative of our team, of how it was going, and the game can be cruel sometimes. But then after that first goal, our fun fact for the year is any game we scored in this fall, we had won. So when that goal went in, that's where the belief came, like, oh, we scored. We don't lose when we score. And that part kind of happened. I think leading up to that, it was one from the bench and, our support staff. I think at one point, Goff and I like walked down the sideline or something. It's like they need us on the field, just like keep trying to give them the energy of it, because we knew we just needed one moment to get us over that 2-0 deficit to be able to give us a chance. And even before the game, when we do a moment, like a power pose moment before the game, and our sports psychologist, Melinda, she said, we need a moment of magic. And I think that was something that ran through my head the entire time, was we just need one moment of magic. And I think I, at least in my head, was saying it. Maybe I kept saying it to you guys. I have no idea. It was a blur, but we just kept riding on that belief, and fortunately it worked out.
Margeuritte, what do you do as the head coach in that moment? You tie it up and there's this jubilation, but then it's like, okay, and if we give up a goal, then forget all this, right? Like, now you have to be the coach and you have to get everyone off that, not off the emotional high, but refocused on, okay, and now it's still 2-2. Like, we still got to do this.
Yeah. I think, like, if you could have surveyed my emotions in the last 10 minutes, they were probably all over the place. Being down 2-0, there was a part of me that was thinking, okay, like, if we do lose this game, like, how am I going to react? How am I going to show this group how to react to something like this, something so disappointing after the year we had? So there was one part of my mind in that moment kind of thinking, all right, how am I going to lead this team through defeat? There was another part of my mind that was like, okay, how are we going to get back into this game? I would say a lot of it, I think we showed a lot of calmness on the sideline. A lot of that came from preparation. So when we actually when the game became 2-1 with 10 minutes left, that was a scenario we had trained many, many times. So we had trained, especially through playoffs, put an emphasis on what we call like game management or situational play. So like down a goal with 10 minutes left, that was something our team was very familiar with. And that was something we learned they talked about in the huddle. So as soon as we scored the first goal, what's awesome is if you watch the broadcast, the player who scored the goal doesn't even look happy.
Mm-hmm.
Her name's Lexi.
Mm-hmm.
It's like pure business, and you can see what she says, and she says something along the lines of like, okay, let's go, like
Mm-hmm.
let's get the next one.
Mm-hmm.
So our team on the field for the first goal didn't really celebrate because they knew we had had kind of one more mountain to climb. With 20 seconds left, when we drew the corner kick, yeah, quite honestly, I was thinking, all right, if Emmy Allen, their goalkeeper, catches this ball, the game is over.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, all right, once again, like, how am I going to compose myself in this like really devastating moment? And what am I going to say to this group to show them and try to communicate like how proud we really are of them, even though we may have lost this game.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, that all changed when we scored.
Mm-hmm.
Thankfully, we scored with like 16 seconds left. So we were like, just clear the ball, you guys, like just kick it out of bounds so we can make it overtime. But then we very quickly had to switch gears because we had to, all of a sudden, we had 5 minutes between the end of regulation and start of overtime. We had obviously made a lot of tactical changes in the last 10 minutes or last 15 minutes really to get those 2 goals. So we had to decide as a staff, okay, are we going to continue in the shape and system and kind of style that we had been that just got us 2 goals to try to win this thing? Or are we going to go kind of revert to what we had been doing for the prior 80 minutes to that? So yeah, it was a very quick switch of like.
What did you decide in that moment? Because I don't remember. Did you just keep going for it?
Question.
Yeah.
Great question. And I honestly may or may not be able to tell you because we were I'll be honest, we were a little scrambling during that time.
Yeah.
One of probably my favorite stories of the entire season came in those 5 minutes. And it kind of helped us make some of those decisions. I think shape-wise, we may have gone. Actually, I'm not sure because Ray and Allie were still on the field. So I'm not sure what our plan was with that.
You just put out 11 people and said, figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah. And so we may have gone into like a 4-4-2-ish kind of shape. But one of our players, Mary Carmen, the one who ended up scoring the final goal, she had not played significantly in either the semi or the final. And we had put her in the last 10 minutes when we were still down 2-1, mostly because she was a 5th-year captain on our team. She deserved to be on the field during that moment. We knew, like, as a staff, we just wouldn't be able to live with ourselves if she was on the bench when we end our season, for good or bad. And going into overtime, we had to decide if we were going to keep her on or not. And she actually came up to us as we were trying to decide what we were doing.
Wow.
And she came up to us and she's like, Marg, like, am I staying on? And I kind of gave her a blank look because we just hadn't quite got to that piece yet. And she's like, leave me on. Like, and she goes like, she like hits her chest. She's like, believe in me, I can do this. Keep me on the field. And we all just looked at each other and we said, okay, sounds great. Like, you will be on the field. And so I think we kept basically the shape we had just come off with her in that same spot. And then very, just poetically, she ends up being the one to score the final goal.
Isn't it great when your players make you look super smart?
Right? Yeah. Right? No, incredible. But it was so cool because it was just such like an emotionally charged moment. And she truly deserved to have that success and to kind of leave her legacy of what it means to her to be part of this program. And I think you could see just with the reaction she had, just how much it meant to her.
And isn't it wonderful to be a coach? And I want coaches to hear this loud and clear. Isn't it wonderful to be a coach who actually trusts in, believes in, and listens to an athlete when they speak, as opposed to thinking you, me, all of us have all the answers, when indeed they are really in touch with a lot of what's going on. I thought that's really admirable.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
What about you guys as assistants in that moment? What are you saying to her? Because, and we want to kind of, I think Jerry and I want to dig in here since we have the whole staff of the dynamics of being an assistant coach. And I've been a college assistant soccer coach and when you're an assistant coach and obviously Marg, you've been an assistant coach for a long time. And here you are a couple of months into your tenure as a head coach. As an assistant coach, you get to make suggestions. And as a head coach, you make decisions. And it's such a different role, and you really don't know what it is until you're in it, right? And until you're the boss of the added pressure and what you feel of, am I going to leave a senior out in the last 10 minutes of her career? Am I going to do this? So Goff, like starting with you, what are you how do you guys work together to come up with what are we going to do in overtime? How does that collaboration work?
So for example, for me, what I'll do, I'll try to give try to stay very logical. As a matter of the scenario, try to stay very logical. My position for me, I have to get the girls ready to go. Good day, bad day, like try to get the best out of the day. And for that, I would say, I know that I would say, well, whether we lose, when we have to do a tactical adjustment, for example, we 2-0 down, I might say something like, we're losing 4-0, we're coming back. And then, but I will give her some suggestions so she can make the decision. And if she does make the decision to do it, I will try to get the girls as prepared as possible. But yeah, trust the process. Try to stay. I'm a passionate guy for the game, very passionate. But I understand that sometimes that passion might make you fail. So I try to stay very logical. So we're down 2-0, 15 minutes left. Maybe it's an adjustment. Which one? Why? Try to think about it, thinking through, and then propose it to the staff. Talk with Molly, talk with Mark, and then yeah.
Mm-hmm. Molly, what about you?
Yeah, I think it's one Goff's our tactical genius, and his energy on the side and throughout the game is incredible. And I think it's one where our collaboration as the three of us during games is neat, because I think at one point Goff came up, he's like, well, what about this idea? And there's okay, so talks to me and then goes to Marg. And then when we look about substitutions and everything, we all check in with each other. What do we think about this? And then it goes with it. And I think a lot of times when, the games are going, it's literally three people trying to rack their brain of what's the best solution or what's going to be the most effective for our group, where a group's at, as well as trying to manage the game and the players as well. And I think that it's one where I think we have three very different ideas and personalities and styles. And so the fact that they can all complement each other, in those really intense moments, and that we know that everyone's going to try to bring the best idea forward for the group is great. So then it's if somebody brings up that suggestion, we know it's okay, this could really work. And there's not a doubt factor of it. It's more all right, this is a great idea. What are some other options? And then even in our Virginia game, for example, when we went into overtime, I don't know, it was one of these two. They're well, why don't we switch to a 4-4-2? And we hadn't really trained that yet or played it that fall. So Goff gets the whiteboard, and then Mark's Goff explain the press. Mark's figuring out a lineup, all of that. And then we go, and the girls understood it, got it. And I think it took, Virginia off guard, but that's where I think we all have our roles. And it just goes into getting them functioning at a really quick, and thorough time frame.
Jerry, it's kind of Ron Adams, who's the assistant coach at Golden State, right? Is that what you were going to ask?
I was going to add that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. No, you can go ahead. Go ahead. Well, anyway, Steve, we have these conversations all the time, what John and I are talking about, and his whole thing, Ron Adams, that was one of his first hires as an assistant when he came on with the Warriors, and he's a defensive genius. In fact, a lot of the Warriors defense to this day holds up with his input. But I love what Steve said about when I said, well, what does he represent to you? And he told me without even hesitating, he's my truth teller. And I'm just wondering, Goff and Molly and Marg, I mean, do you have this kind of relationship? Is that something that resonates with you, being a truth teller? Marg, as a head coach, do you want, going back to what we were talking about with UCLA and John Wooden, he didn't want yes people around him. He didn't want his ego stroked. He wanted the truth as well. How does that resonate with you, with this staff here?
Yeah, it strikes us. I think for me, especially, I would consider myself a truth teller. It's funny, when I was at Stanford, that's exactly what my head coach said to me, which is he would say, you're the voice of reason. And I very much saw that as my role. I do feel like I see my role as a head coach son kind of similarly. And even when on the sideline, I feel like the dynamic is, we're all watching. We all kind of say what's going well or what's not. And what I love about the staff is like, as soon as I say like, okay, I don't like what's happening in the midfield, both Goff and Molly are coming up with solutions. And what I love about it is like, I think flexibility is so key in success, and being able to put our egos aside, and not just my own as a coach, but it's like when we go into a game with a game plan, it's typically a game plan all three of us have either come up with collaboratively or all of us have approved. So when it's not going well, it's not really on any one of us. It's like all three of us like went for that. So we have to be able to put our ego aside and be like, all right, what we thought was going to work is not working. Now we have to find a solution. Kind of in line with truth telling, I do feel like our staff is very solution oriented, which is really great. I think it helps speed up the process on the sideline. We don't get too hung up on what the problem is and why it is. We're more hung up on, okay, what's the solution? Mm-hmm. And even with our players, we had, for instance, a game where a player lost a mark on a corner. So we were down 1-0. She comes off the field apologizing. And I was like, you really don't need to apologize, because now we need to figure out how to score a goal. Like, we can talk about the goal you gave up. We can talk about that on Tuesday. Yeah. But right now, like, we need to figure out how you're going to help us score a goal now. And so we're just very much like task-oriented, solution-oriented, try not to get hung up on too much of the emotional side of it, which I do feel like plays
a lot of the truth you're talking about is important, and it has a lot to do with X's and O's and tactical strategies and what have you. But what about, there are times when a head coach is just not communicating well with an athlete and they're really struggling. Is this staff open to the truth, which is, hey, Mark, you might want to think about this. I know this kid and she'll respond better if you talk this way. Is that something that you want to hear? Is that something that you guys have had happen during the year?
Yeah, I'd be totally open to that. I think we all have, we've all had our moments where we're like, okay, maybe, yes, I know how you're feeling. Maybe we don't say it that way. But I do think also what we have in common is a knack for communicating and connecting with players. I think by default, we have some players on our team that maybe connect better with Goff, or maybe some connect better with Molly, some that gravitate towards me.
Sure.
That person tends to kind of take the lead in that communication. I will admit some of the harder communication falls on my shoulders. That's part of my responsibility. But what we try to do with that is ensure that whenever we talk to student athletes, like, we're always reasonable, we're always honest and fairly compassionate. So even when they come to us with something that is fairly upsetting or frustrating to us, we generally tackle it in a way that's like very calm. Goff teases me because I always talk in the same way. I talk like this, even if it's good or bad or ugly. I'm like, wow, that is really something. Let's talk about that.
Is that your psychology? Is that your psychology background that brings you to that place?
I think that's the like years of life and experience. And I think what we try to keep in mind, like we're not professional coaches. Like, we coach adults in training. I wouldn't call them quite kids, but they're not quite adults either. And so I think we have to keep that in mind when they do or say something that maybe is not in line with what we would like them to do. It's more about teaching them kind of how to get there and bridging that gap than getting really frustrated. I always kind of chuckle at coaches that get defensive. I'm like, why are you upset? Like, she's a kid. Like, why are you mad? Like, just show her how to, like, at least give her the chance to change. And then if she doesn't, then of course you can be frustrated or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, one of my favorite all-time quotes is Mark Twain. And he says, when I was 14, my dad was so ignorant, I couldn't stand to be around the man. By the time I turned 21, I couldn't believe how much he had learned in 7 years. Right. And I think of that with the age of kids that you're coaching. That's it right there. Is like, this is not, especially, and today's 21-year-old is not the 21-year-old of 2 decades ago either. And so really paying attention to who's in front of me and what do they need, and that they are the hard truths that I have to tell. They're probably not going to, some people are not going to appreciate those for 5 or 10 years. or maybe ever. Right. But if I'm consistent in telling the truth, they can't ever say, oh, well, Marg lied to me or Molly lied to me or whatever. Like, they told me what they thought was true, and they're, and they keep their word, and they did that to everyone. And I wasn't ready to hear it, or I still to this day disagree with it. But they didn't make something up to make me feel better in the moment. And I think that's an important part. Like, one of the greatest things of leadership, sports or otherwise, is build a relationship that can bear the burden of that truth, right?
Yeah, we talk sometimes about like consistency that you mentioned, predictability. Like, it's really important that our players know what they can expect when they talk to us, whether that's in kind of our demeanor. Obviously, like, they can expect the truth, they can expect transparency. That's huge. And we also know that, like, if we tell the truth along the way, kind of like if we tell little truths along the way, often it mitigates like having to tell a giant truth, that is kind of like a groundbreaking or devastating truth. Like, if you're honest with them along the way, then oftentimes they're not blindsided by any bad news typically at the end. So we try to be super transparent. We try to be approachable and very reasonable when we're interacting with our student athletes.
Goff, what have you learned from the two people you work with here, that if someday you become a head coach, the qualities that you want to take to your own program? Not that he's leaving. I have no inside information. I'm just saying, just throwing this out there hypothetically.
The first thing is, I would say that because we're all pretty young, and to really understand that with the next kind of like generation of coaches, and then we will do it a different way, because we all been coached from Europe, and my coaches were very different, and I know some coaches here as well that they are differently, and as well that it's okay to be the environment doesn't have to be strict. You can be, if it's a great environment, it's a good environment, if people care about each other, if it's welcoming. For example, I'm from France, I have an accent. I can be different in a lot of ways, but since day one, been welcomed, but they welcome me pretty well, and I feel very safe here. Mm-hmm. So it's really just the care. There's a lot of care around, and then we have a lot of fun. I think the player having a lot of fun, and it's and then we got it done. So I feel like that's something. Even I took that with my club team now. My club teams, I coach the girls, and just really keep it fun, keep it positive, but that doesn't mean that you're not working hard.
Molly, what about you? What have you learned from these two that you'll bring with you?
I definitely think one is, like God kind of mentioned, but the safety of the staff and the program in and of itself. I think it's one where we all feel we can be who we are, but being around a staff that complements each other and are good people that really want to help improve this next generation of players for their next chapter in life, whether that's professional, whether that's grad school, whether that's job, whatever it might be, I think is really important. I think a big one for me is the creativity and the artist side that these two bring, because I'm a little type A at times, so they've really helped me be more chill, I would say. I think that's a big one.
It's work in progress.
But so that part of it is just how you have the organization, but also the fun, the creativity, and just expressive side, which is a little bit outside my normal comfort zone. So I think that's important, being able to do that. And I think even just from a department standpoint, looking for certain the energy and just something that everyone's pulling for you in the same direction and willing to help out is really important. But at the end of the day, if there's no joy in the game, then why do we do it? So I think finding small moments to continue with the joy in the game is something that's going to propel coaches not only be better coaches, but also to be in this profession for a really long time.
Wow.
Jerry, I just want to ask one more follow up there. I like this joy theme, and I think we need to touch on that. But I want to ask you, Marg, why these two? You're the new head coach at UCLA. You pretty much can hire anyone you want. What was it about them? No, what was it about them that said these are the people that I want to build my staff with? Because again, like, it's your first head coaching job and it's a big one. You got to get it right. What was it about these two that said us three together are going to be better than any of us by ourselves?
Molly said the Three Musketeers. So one of our former players, she just graduated. She aspires to be a coach. And one day, as we were walking off the field, she like kind of pulled me aside and she was like, Marg, like, did you just hire your two best friends or what? Like, and I kind of laughed because that is definitely in some way what we've grown to be. Balance was really big for me. Like, I know the type of people I gravitate towards. I know my own tendencies. I hope I have a decent grasp of my strengths and weaknesses. And if not strengths and weaknesses, then definitely my preferences. So I needed to make sure that I surrounded myself with people that would, one, bring out the best of me, but then also help cover me in areas that I either don't tend towards or are not great in. So for instance, like, I tend on the sideline to be very steady. But I don't know if that's always good for all three of us to be like that. Sometimes you need somebody who's a little more expressive. So for instance, Goff is kind of up and down and talking, and I'm fine with that. I also don't love some of the organizational things that Molly is so great at. So that, like, it was about balance of personality, also balance in terms of our strengths and weaknesses on and off the field. But more important than that was chemistry. So I was very fortunate at Stanford to be part of a staff for a long time where, like, we got along so well. It was so fun to be a part of. And our head coach was so incredibly caring, so astute. Like, as an assistant, I felt like I would literally do anything to help him succeed. And I wanted all of us to feel that way about each other. So the chemistry was really big. I have known Molly for a really long time. So going on like 8 or 9 years probably. And we've always hit it off, which is fun. I think my husband teases me because he's like, I hung out with Molly the other day and you guys are so similar. So that was kind of funny. And then Goff, like, I do think it takes sometimes a special person to be the only guy in a program of like 45 women. And he handles it with grace. And I also say about Goff, like, he loves the game so much that it would hurt his feelings if you don't like it. And so that's like, I wanted that in our program too. Like, I wanted the joy we have for the game and the joy we have for coaching to be palpable to the team. Like, so the team can feel that. Because I'm like, you can't, like, if we love coaching so much, we love the game so much, like, they have no choice but to love it too. Like, there's nothing about the game that we resent. And so they can't latch on to anything like that. And so, you know, chemistry and then balance, I think, were the two things that drove my decision.
Jerry, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm going to switch gears here, but what I'm going to do is coattail onto what you just said, and that is this word joy. A lot of people are afraid of joy because if we're having a lot of joy and a lot of fun, we're not serious, right? Like, you guys are having too much fun. It's like my work and John's work. It's so much fun. It's like, they're going to pay me for this? Are you kidding? So with that said, I've had a lot of fortune and opportunity. I've been part of 115 plus championship teams in my career. But one that stands out is the one at University of Maryland with Cindy Timshall, lacrosse, women's lacrosse. We won 7 consecutive national championships, which is unheard of. Right? And people think, well, you know, did you plan on that? No. What we planned on is we planned on executing all of our values in a good way, implementing our values. So that said, the top value in that organization was joy. We had so much fun laughing together. We got our feet on the pitch. When we got out on the field, it was like, okay, you're not going to touch me. And it was that serious, so then we come into this whole idea of grit. That was another one of our values. So without going any further, your championship wasn't won that day. Your championship was won with the foundation. I'm going to interpret some things here. You had a really strong foundation of love together, all three of you, and for your team. That was a foundational building block of this championship. What else did you have in place in terms of values, and how did you get the buy-in or the implementation of that? And I mean, that's an important component of that championship, isn't it?
Yeah. The love we have for each other, for the team, kind of that care and compassion, that was huge. I would say trust is another one, because we took over a program, and trust and buy-in, I think, are kind of similar. We were so fortunate because I think the team decided before we got there that they were going to go all in. So we didn't face a lot of resistance. Now, I think part of that also is because when we came in initially, we first prioritized connecting with the players and building relationships with the players. So before we even Molly and Goff, before Goff and Molly were even here,
Golly.
and I was kind of in my golly, Miss Molly over here. Before we were even hired, like, I met with every single player, and we met for a lot of the meetings were an hour and a half. And I basically just said, like, what questions do you have for me? And also, like, what has your experience been so far? What do you want your experience to be? What should I know about you to help me coach you going forward?
Wow.
And I think just like setting that as the foundation of, like, we really care about you as people. And yes, like, the soccer is going to be the soccer, and we're going to get the most out of us that way, but, like, we're going to enjoy it, and we're here for you. I think that was huge in building those building blocks, I guess, if you will, for the success we had during season. Mm-hmm. And what I loved about, like, the fashion in which we win, now I wouldn't ever choose to win a championship like that again, but what I loved about it is, like, I think every player on the field and every player on the bench had a moment where they, like, looked at someone else and was like, no, we got this. Like, we can do this. And it was like, we're all going to do it together. We're all going to trust each other. Like, we're going to trust that we're going to give a maximum effort, and we're going to pull this off some way, somehow. But again, I can't be more appreciative of the team, because they basically made a decision that they were going to trust us. And we made it very clear that we were going to then reciprocate that trust and allow them to play on the field with freedom and creativity, and allow them to make mistakes, because we trusted that they were going to do everything to the best of their ability. But without that trust, I don't think it would have achieved what we achieved.
So the most important game that you won leading up to the championship was the relationship game. Is that so?
Yeah.
That was really, I hear what you're saying, Marg, is that's where we need to start. Mm-hmm. And when you start there, it builds the trust, which gets to the buy-in, which gets people loving each other. And as Phil Jackson once said, without the love, he would have never won one of those 11 championships either. So it's so great to hear. I mean, for me, it's just so inspiring. Things that I know, to hear from people who are actually in the trenches doing this work, who are saying the same kind of things that John and I are trying to work with our teams and our athletes as well. But that's beautiful. John,
I was just thinking as you're saying that, and thinking about, okay, this is what we did in year one. So now how do we go forward? And whatever popped in my head was just an interview with the University of Georgia football coach, Mark Rick, I think his name is. And they interviewed him after they just won another championship. And he said, there's no entitlement in our locker room. And if you don't have entitlement in your locker room, you always got a chance. How do you, going forward now, make sure, like, what are the non-negotiables for all of you, for a staff, if you want to be a UCLA player, if you want to put on that shirt, so that there is no entitlement in that locker room? Because not only are you not entitled to win next year, but it's that much harder because everyone circled this game on the calendar.
Yeah, this is one thing that intrigues me, because so often, I think in these types of conversations where you get kind of the coaching minds all together, so many of the conversations revolve around how to deal with failure. And so few conversations talk about how to deal with great success. So this is something we're kind of battling with. I think you're right, entitlement. I will say we haven't necessarily addressed it directly, but it's like more so we've taken the approach of, yeah, we won last year and we were not nearly as good as we could have been. It's more of like putting another carrot in front of them. That really doesn't have to do with another championship. It's like, we can still be so much better. Like, and I think that's what excites us as a staff, which is like, yeah, we won this year and you guys, we trained for 6 months as a team beforehand. Like, imagine how much better we're going to be when we have another 6 months together, and like really enticing them with elements of their own development and our team development, and adding components into training that we didn't talk about last year, just to keep them excited about the game in general. Our team, I will say, like, they have a little edge to them. Like, they don't seem to mind having a target on their back. It seems like they kind of enjoy it, which is a good thing. Because we haven't heard too many mumblings about that, even that pressure, to be honest. But we also like to face things pretty head on. So we very early on in this off season talked about like anticipated challenges. Okay, going forward, now that we've won, what do you think, what challenges will we face this year that we didn't face last year because we hadn't won? In fact, we had lost in the first round. So like, how do we talk? We talked about complacency. We talked about, yeah, that entitlement, the ego. Like, how do we face those things head on? And we try to be, I think, pretty collaborative between our staff and our players about, okay, this is what we see up ahead of us. Like, these could be some bumps along the way. Like, what do you guys think? How should we go about this? And I think that also creates some of that buy-in, some of that ownership, like including them in the process of anticipating those challenges.
Golf or Molly, how do you all, because I think one of the things, because I know you all probably do a ton of the recruiting piece, and when you graduate a player, like sometimes we look at them as not the robot, but, oh, if we replace the soccer piece, we need another striker, we need another left-footed winger or back or whatever. Oh, and we think so-and-so will take that place. But the hardest thing to often replace is the chemistry and the roles that people play within that team and within a locker room. I mean, I think championship locker rooms always have people. I mean, one of my friends who's won 2 MLS championships says both of those teams, there's always groups in there. And especially like in Major League Soccer, you have, Spanish speakers and non-Spanish speakers, whatever. He said, but both of those locker rooms had players that could easily move amongst the groups and the cliques and the classes and whatever, and pull them all together. So how do you be mindful of, in recruiting, not just the technical or tactical ability? How are you mindful about the personalities that fit what it means to be a UCLA soccer player?
I think it's a little like twofold. I think on the first part of when a player does graduate, I think it's our responsibility as a staff to be really intentional with some of our younger players, or the ones that have some really good qualities, but need to now step into a new role of having a different voice on the team, because leadership is a skill set. And I think through the repetition and being able to help the current players, that's how in like next year, we're hoping some players will evolve into that role. On the recruiting process side, I think our philosophy is be really, really thorough. Yes, I think it's very easy. We can see the top talent, but it's who's going to be the top talent, or who's going to evolve into a really incredible player and teammate as they step into their college career. I think that the fact that we are very thorough, very intentional, we each, when we speak with recruits and look to identify, talk with a lot of their coaches, but then the player themselves. And we all have different things that are important to us that all kind of go underneath the umbrella or the values that, Mark has led us through our program with. And so that we all get a different perspective, and then we all come together, and we'll have some very long conversations at times about, is it the best soccer player, but who's the right and best player for us and in our program, going forward, looking at it. But
yeah. And I think for me as well, it's about like the team culture. So if you come to a 1 hour practice and we ask you to say who's a freshman, sophomore, or junior, you won't know. So like, because like the culture is like everybody's welcome, and you can really just be yourself. So if you're quiet one, like you can do it. If you're a little goofy, if you like to dance, or if you like to do, anything like to do, you're able to do it without having like the fear to be judged. So I think that that helps. That helps a lot. And even that, like, it's a competitive environment. So if you're good enough, if you're the best at your position, doesn't really matter if you're fifth year senior or you're a freshman. So which I feel like that will help with the management of the group.
Marg, anything to add on that, especially as you bring in new players? And I think this is in general, sometimes a unique challenge in women's sports when you bring in someone who's uber competitive and can upset the balance of whatever, of like, they're new to the group, and Anson's talked about this a bunch and everything. Like, how do you create that environment where this new player comes in and she is just firing on all cylinders and super competitive, and you create that space for her to compete like crazy, without saying why she hasn't connected with anyone yet, she's brand new? How do you manage that?
So as this conversation was going on, I was kind of thinking, like, player management is such a big part of our job. And player management, there's one element of that is individual. So coach to that one player. There's another piece of that is like what Goff alluded to, which is like, can we create a culture strong enough where that's okay? Now, we try to be pretty clear in our program, like what is acceptable behavior, what is not acceptable behavior. For instance, on our team, I'll say to them, like, if someone's not trying, by all means, you can yell at them, because that's not okay in our program. Like, if you're not trying, then yeah, you should expect to be yelled at by your teammates, because it's not okay. Now, if she's trying and ball goes off her shin, in our view, like, that's not a time to yell at her. She knows. Right? So it's little things like that, conversations we had with our group. One funny example that's popping in my mind is there's two actually, about kind of that element of working hard defending. We often say that defending reflects our culture much more than the attacking side, because defending, oftentimes you're working because of mistakes someone else made. So like, I might have to sprint back 40 yards because I always throw Molly under the bus. So because Goff lost the ball. Okay. So Goff lost the ball, so I have to sprint back 40 yards, and I have to be willing to do that. My willingness to do that is a reflection of how much I care about Goff and how much I care about the team. So there's that kind of element within what we do. We had one of our earliest film sessions during the year. We got scored on in an exhibition game because our two attacking midfielders, two senior players, did not track back. So we lost the ball in transition. They're hanging out in the center circle. The other team's like midfielder ends up scoring. So we stopped the film and we say to the group, it's like, so when the ball goes past you, we lose the ball goes past you, you can choose to run one of two places. And they're like, I was like, what's the first place? And they're like, well, you can run back. I said, right. Like, ball goes past you, you can sprint back. And then I said, where's the other place? And they all like looked at me kind of quietly. And I said, the other place is the bench. So you can choose, like, either sprint back, or next sub you sprint to the bench, because it's just not okay. And sure enough, the player, actually it was Mary, who ends up scoring. So to go from, this is our first game, she doesn't sprint back, we get scored on, to then she ends up finishing our season on a goal. She texts me afterward. She goes, oh my gosh, Marg, I'm so embarrassed. That will never happen again. So all I write back is good. It shouldn't. Right. So there's that. Another example, we had a player whose dad asked her, I've never seen you defend so much. Why are you defending so much? And she said, Dad, because I want to play. So there's just things in our program that I think we are so consistent on. Effort is one of them. That's like, effort and competitiveness is a given. And you're more likely to be yelled at for not giving effort or not competing than for giving too much effort or over competing. And that just has to be okay. Now, we also do a lot of relationship building between the team, talk a lot about communication, what's okay, what's not okay, how to address when Molly yells at me, it hurts my feeling. How do I address that with her in a positive and constructive way? So we try to arm our players with the tools to create that environment. And then we try to kind of guide them in helping to maintain it.
No, I love it. What about parents because parents are part of the culture, right? Parents are part of the
Mhm.
culture, and even if they're not in the locker room, they come to the games, they talk to their kids after, they say, why are you doing so much defending? You're an attacker. Why are you doing this, right? Like, that's something I think even as a college coach these days, we have to be aware of the influence of parents on this. It was funny. I was doing a talk actually in Manhattan Beach a couple weeks ago, and one of the people I was talking to was a sports agent. And I said, "What happens with parents on the professional level when they're not happy with their kids' playing time?" And he said they call the agent. And so I just spend all day on the phone talking to the parents of my professional athletes because they're complaining to me, because they're not going to go complain to the head coach of a pro team, but they complain to me instead. How do you incorporate and help parents understand this is the culture, this is what we're asking your daughters to do?
I think the number one thing parents worry about is are their children being cared for? So that's like the first thing we try to do is make it explicitly clear that we care about each and every one of their daughters and make sure that they feel like their daughters are being well taken care of. I feel like when that is well established, then the soccer conversations are minimized a little bit. Quite honestly, we haven't faced too many so far, knock on wood. It helps when you win a national championship. Not as many people complain typically.
Mm-hmm.
But we also talk to our players a lot about how to manage those conversations. We try to make those expectations very clear. So for instance, we are very honest with players about how much we anticipate they're going to play during the season.
Mm.
And kind of the agreement we have is that if you decide to stay, so for instance, if I tell Molly that she's not likely to play or she's going to be striving to make the travel team and she decides to stay, then we make it very clear that the agreement is she's going to behave well.
Mm.
And part of that agreement is, and we use this example explicitly, we say, so when your parents say, like, Molly, your coaches aren't treating you well, that's not fair. How could they not play you? You tell them, no, they told me that I wasn't going to start this game, or they told me that I wasn't likely to play. And you shut it down. And that's the expectation.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of part of being in our program, is managing your parents' expectations. Now, on the other side, we've had players come to us that are feeling a lot of pressure from their parents. And so we may rehearse with them what they can say to their parents to help lessen that. And we may offer, hey, if this conversation is hard, let us know if you want us to be on the phone with you. And we can help you kind of navigate that conversation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Because everyone who comes to UCLA has probably never been on the bench in their life, right? So you're also dealing with first-time scenarios.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think like open conversation is so powerful, and acknowledging how a player may feel sitting on the bench for the first time. And so we hope that we help them through that without needing the parents to get involved. Mm-hmm. Now, we have had other parents reach out, like we do sometimes welcome conversations if they feel like their daughter is struggling with something and give us a heads up, like that's a welcome conversation. Of course, But I think also our parents know that things like playing time, stuff like that, we always will direct it back to the player, where it's like, you know what, this is a conversation we really need to be having with Molly. Yeah. Our dear player, Molly, who keeps giving the ball.
Molly.
Molly.
Rough ball.
That's awesome. Jerry, any other thoughts? Final question.
Yeah,
from you,
I'm sitting here
looking.
I'm sitting here looking at golf, and I'm saying, golf, God, you're unusual, right? There's a lot of men out. There's a lot of men out there that really you are. There's a lot, and I'll clarify that, but there's a lot of men out there, especially at the youth level. And John, you see a lot of these people. They're men and they're coaching little girls. And here you are in a program. I'm sure you got guys down. What do I need to know as a male if I'm going to come into an environment where I'm coaching female athletes? What one or two things can you tell me that's going to make my life a lot easier and make me a better coach? And by the smiles on your faces, I know this is something you've talked about.
I think it's just being patient, but like I think even anywhere in coaching, you need to be patient and just listen.
Listen, huh?
Listen and care.
Yeah.
Listen and care.
Listen.
And
care.
then and in my mindset, it's that what we do is already hard. So let's be on the same page doing it, and let's try to have fun.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
Ooh.
you know, because we're gonna lose a game whether you go out there and then you try to be as serious, as strict as possible, and then the environment will be the same. There's still gonna be 4 referee. It's gonna blow the whistle, and you're gonna play for 90 minutes. And then even if you have the tactic right, and that's what we say, like we might have think about the tactic and have everything right, you still might lose the game on individual mistake.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really being rational of what happens, be logical. That's something I talk about a lot, like logical in business. Let's get the business done. And if you need to score 2 goals, well, the business is to score 3. And how are we going to do it?
Listening. I love that. That's why I've been married for 43 years. when I don't listen, it goes nowhere. And you know, with working with guys, that's not the case all the time. You know, you can just kick them in the butt and get them out. They get out in the field, and that's, you know, you don't have to listen. But that's very good advice. Thank you. I had to use you here. I had to take advantage of this.
To be honest, it's been just like a pure blast. It's been hard but easy.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been like the players been awesome, the staff's been awesome. You know, couldn't ask for different players and all different coaches to work with.
Well, I have just a question on the future of the game and college in it. And Marg, I was reading your bio, and I think it was 8 or 9 different national team players, internationals that you were able to coach at Stanford, and certainly when you're coaching at UCLA, you're just going to add to that list. But the game, the women's game, is growing very fast around the world. I was in Spain last week. I went to FC Barcelona versus Roma, 55,000 people at Camp Nou. It was unbelievable. I had my U16 boys team there with me, and they were like, that was the best game I've ever seen. I mean, watching Barcelona play was incredible. The skill, the tactics, the movement, the atmosphere was unbelievable. And the rest of the world's catching up to the US, because I think they do it a little bit better on the youth level. What do we have to do? What do we have to start doing? What do we have to stop doing to keep being one of the best teams in the world? And also, just sort of a different question, what do we do to keep growing the game? Because we have the Women's World Cup this summer. The game's becoming more popular. Crowds are getting bigger and better. It's an awesome time for women's soccer in the United States and in the world. So how do we make it better in this country?
This is a very big question.
Yeah, that's why I saved it for last.
I wish I had all the answers. I think the number one thing from a youth development side, or not maybe the number one thing, but one thing of great importance, is putting more emphasis on how we teach the tactical side of the game. I think at this point, a lot of times the first introduction these players have to a real tactical view, a strategic view even of the game, is maybe college. And that's because for instance, a lot of our players have played on a team where they've never had to adjust. You know, for instance, if they're on a club team that wins every game, like they've never had to adjust their tactics. They've never had to sit in a lower block. They've never had to press in a 2 front and then defend in a 3. Like they haven't had to do that. We had some eye-opening moments through this season where we would ask our team when we first took over. We played a game and I said at halftime, okay, what system is the other team in? And none of our players had an idea. And I was like, if you just know that we're playing a 4-3-3 and they're playing a 4-4-2 diamond, like just knowing that will give you so many answers as to what is on today. And what has really changed our is that now they're starting to look at it that way. But it's incredible, just like kind of a lack of appreciation even for the tactical understanding of the game at a young age. Another eye-opening moment I had as a younger coach, I did a coaching course where a staff member from Athletic Bilbao came, and he compared U.S. soccer versus what they teach in his club. Here, when we think of like the 4 components of the game, it's mental, physical, tactical, technical. right? And that's how we're taught from a young age to think about soccer. He said, oh yeah, we have 4 elements too. And he said, we teach players to look at the game in relation to the ball, in relation to the space, in relation to the opponent, and in relation to their own teammates.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, wow, well, that will really change how you see the game versus how we see it, right? It's so much more abstract. It's so much more tactical. It's so much more of a strategy game compared to like how we put a lot of emphasis on, can we physically be better than the other team or something like that. So I think that is where the ground is being made up. What the other countries may lack on the physical side, they're now making up with a tactical understanding. And that's, so I'm like, if we're going to compete, we need to start valuing the tactics and strategy from a much, much younger age. They need to be looking at the game that way. For instance, our players panic when we don't have the ball.
Yeah.
I'm like, there are teams in the world that don't have the ball on purpose.
Yeah, they don't want the ball.
And they don't want, but they would rather counter. Like,
yeah.
And so we kind of made our players watch high level games and be like, look at these high level teams sitting in a mid block and being effective. Let's watch Real Madrid win a championship, knocking off the best teams in the world, sitting in a mid block, and to like show them that that's high level soccer.
Right.
And it's not always you have the ball 80% of the time. Like we had so many moments of that really, I think, changed how we are now teaching the game to our players in hopes that it will prepare them to be successful at the next level. Now, the trouble is that's when we get players at 18 years old. It'd be really nice to get those players thinking that way. Like in Spain, I'm sure they're thinking that way when they're 8 years old.
They are. I've been to La Masia and watched the 8-year-olds play, and the game intelligence is so high. Yeah. I remember.
And it's just a completely different thing.
I have a friend who coached in La Masia for 10 years, and he was, at the time, he was coaching the 10-year-olds, and he was out scouting. And I said, what do you look for? And he said, whatever the Spanish word, it was insight, right? Not technique, right? Everyone's technical, right? Insight, understanding, see the field, understand space, all that. So yeah, I agree. I think that we're very stuck in this country on, we can't teach that until we get the technique right. But everywhere else in the world that does it well, they teach them all together, right? It all develops together. And yeah, I was at the Women's World Cup in 2019 and saw the US beat Spain. And I said, I don't know that we're going to keep doing that, right? Because their game intelligence was higher. And what we had was Megan Rapinoe on the day, right? We had people who could play under pressure and hit a big penalty shot or whatever, you know. And it's not that we don't have good players, because we do, but you know, we're kind of gaining them in a war of attrition with so many people playing and just not teaching them right. And we get the survivors, whereas the Spains and the Belgiums and these up and coming countries are maximizing. France for sure. Sorry, I went and saw France lose to the US that year too, Goff. Sorry about that.
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay.
Yeah. The other thing that comes to me is I was actually talking to one of my friends about this yesterday, is like, I'm really curious to see how our identity as a country will change and what, in order to be successful, like what that will demand of, for instance, the US national team. When you look at the Spains of the world, Japans of the world, England's of the world, like they have such an identity, and it's like a tactical and stylistic identity. I think we lack that in the US a little bit, aside from, you know, like we're kind of physically dominant, we're mentally like we have that winning mentality. I'd be curious to see how like our style will evolve when it like becomes based on, if we value the result. For instance, right now I'm like, in my view, the US national team, it could be an incredible counterattacking team. Like, who wants to defend Sophia Smith in 60 yards of space? Not probably anybody, right? But I'm like, but that's against our style.
Right. And
I'm curious to see how it evolves, of like, at what point will we sacrifice our style to continue being successful? And I feel like there's going to be a tipping point. Or will we embrace flexibility and adaptability as part of who we are? Because in order to play against a Spain, play against a Japan, versus play against a Brazil, like we are going to have to be able to adapt. So I'm really curious to see kind of what the next 5 to 10 years look like for our national team and kind of our national style of soccer.
Well, it is definitely becoming a global game on the women's side, and which is great for our players and great for the game and great for filling stadiums of people. And it's amazing. So, well, listen, thank you all so much. This was absolutely fantastic to have you all on. A great conversation. We could keep it going forever, but I know you're busy, and we want to be respectful of your time. So, any parting thoughts or final things you'd like to leave our listeners with? And then we just want to wish you great luck next season, going for the repeat.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, all we can say is just thank you both for having us on. I think we truly enjoy talking about these things and kind of the nuances of our program and just how coaching is changing. So any opportunity we get to do that, we just truly appreciate. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you all. Thank you all. Jerry, any final word?
No, I'm just I just learned so much today. I have a whole sheet of notes down here that I've taken. But anyway,
awesome.
This is why we do it.
Yeah. Thank you all very, very much.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jerry, that was a great conversation there, wasn't it?
Oh my gosh. I mean, I have so many takeaways. I don't know if we have time to go through them all. You probably do as well.
Well, I mean, I am thinking, why have we waited 320 episodes or so to have a whole staff on and talk to them all together rather than just the separate parts? I mean, obviously everyone's busy. You know, what I wanted to ask Marg, and I didn't, was, you know, when you reached out to her, the first thing she said, have us all on.
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't like it's about me. It was like, have us all on. And and that was so cool to see that. I mean, we could watch their dynamic and their back and forth and their genuine, the inside jokes and the looks and whatever.
Yeah.
Like, you can see why they work successfully together.
Much more animated. You get a really sense about the culture when you have all three coaches on board, you know, and their roles and what have you. It makes it more real, doesn't it? I mean,
yeah, totally makes it
one
more
of
real.
the things I take away. First of all, I'll just make this quick comment. What a brilliant young woman. What a brilliant mind that she has, not just for the game, but for people, you know.
Very high emotional intelligence.
And I know she has a psych degree, but believe me, I've known a lot of people with psych degrees that are nowhere near her level of intelligence. But the other thing that really strikes me, and I think everybody should consider this in their program, is the collaboration. It's really deep. I mean, the collaboration, and it's not just between the staff, which we saw, obviously, but the collaboration with the athletes. Like when she was approached by that athlete, she listened to the athlete and she went along with the athlete's wishes, and for good reason. Then the athlete, of course, wins the national champion, not wins it, but scores the winning goal.
Scores the winning goal, yeah.
Right. And that whole idea of collaboration was really, really powerful to me. And the other thing, when I asked, I had to get Goff in on the conversation. Is the only guy there, and it's like, I know they're different, and I talked to Anson about the differentness things and the things to be aware of, and he comes up with the idea of listening. And women love to be listened to, and I was serious about that. You know, the reason why, you know, my marriage is made it because we listen to each other, but especially as a man, you know, I'm not there like trying to dictate what goes on. I'm listening to what the needs are and then trying to make adjustments based on that. So I thought that was pretty amazing as well.
Well, I'm totally spacing his name now, but the guy who wrote Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, you know who I'm talking about? The author,
I absolutely, yeah. And now I'm going to space it out too.
Yeah. And you know, when I did my TED Talk, he was on stage, and I just said, you know, hey, your book has saved my marriage, and it's because when guys talk to each other, our immediate thing is to solve the problem, and oftentimes women just want someone to listen to them, right, as they work through it, and so that's a really important thing. And it was great. I mean, I love, you know, Goff's, you can just see his joy come through as well. You can see how much he loves. Like, I watch his body language as we're having this conversation, and I'm going, that's a guy that I'd like to play for. You know, he's loved, you know, he's smiling, you know, he's organized, you know, he's working hard. And I thought with Molly as well, you could see the passion and the learning and the self-awareness on her part as well, of like,
Yeah.
sometimes I get a little too serious and these guys unwind me a little bit, and whatever, and her learning. I mean, it's clearly just a great staff, and well deserving of their success. And we'll have to have them back on in another year or two to see, well, how did they do? Did they win again? What were the challenges? What were the obstacles? What did they learn?
Yeah, exactly. Of course, when you have a great staff like that, one of the problems is they don't hang around too long. That's not usual. And, sometimes they move on for good reasons. And I think the job of a really good head coach is to get your staff positioned for a higher level. And just listening to Margeuritte today, it's obvious to me that she's preparing them for something more and something bigger. And boy, it was just a lot of joy. I love the conversation about parents too. I think that's so crucial, because a lot of people think, well, you get to college, parents won't bother you, blah, blah, blah. I've sat in an office of Cindy Timshaw with lacrosse, and parents have come in and sat down and talked to Cindy. My kid's not getting enough minutes. They're not getting enough playing time. Freshman, right? The star in high school. Well, that's when we decided to start the parent program. So we had a parent program going on where we would make the announcement to the parents every season. This is our goal. This is our mission. This is what we're trying to achieve here. And that's what she was saying basically, is you get the parents on board, then that's not an issue.
Well, I like also that, hey, you're not on the travel squad, or you're not going to start. What are you going to say to your dad or mom when they ask you why? And let's prepare you for that conversation. Yeah. Right. Like, I thought that was, and that's an extra added step that I thought was,
I love it. I love it. It's like
really
heading it off at the pass.
Yeah, for sure. Well, listen, everyone, it's kind of a good segue, Jerry, right? Talk about your staff and getting your staff together. One of the cool things about our upcoming conference is how many entire coaching staffs are coming, right? So coaches are bringing their assistants, and athletic directors are bringing their department, excuse me, to, because learning together like this and implementing this together is much better. So for everyone listening, right, get signed up. August 4th, 5th, and 6th, the Way Champions Conference. Phil Jackson's joining us. Cindy Timshall's joining us. She'll be there in person, Phil via video. It's going to be pretty awesome. So, get signed up. Just go to changingthegameproject.com, and it's just Way Champions Conference. Get signed up soon, because we're going to be out of hotel rooms here pretty soon. So, any final word, Jer?
No, that's it. We've said enough.
We've said enough. Awesome, everyone. Remember, your influence is never neutral. So go out there and use it for good this week. And we'll be back again next week with another episode. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, John. So